My sister said run, so I ran. No goodbye, no backward glance. I didn't even take my shoes. I ran, with his children growing inside me and her perfume still on his collar. 5 years. 5 years of silence, of hiding, of building something small and quiet out of the wreckage neither of them knew they had caused. And then, one evening, the door opened. There he stood. Zoran Vale, the man I loved, the man I fled, the man who had no idea he was looking at the mother of his twins. Before this story goes any further, if you are someone who feels everything deeply, who stays up too late because a story won't let you go, subscribe right now. Because what is coming next is not a love story alone. It is a betrayal story, a survival story. And before it is over, it will break something in you, and then slowly, quietly, put it back together. Now, let's talk about Zoran Vale. There are men who are powerful, and there are men who are power itself. Zoran was the second kind. At 34, he controlled the northern shipping corridors of 3 continents, ran a legitimate empire of cold storage logistics, and behind it, invisible to every government, every journalist, and every enemy who tried and failed, he ran something far older, far darker. An organization so deeply embedded into the bones of the city of Varenk that removing it would collapse half the infrastructure holding the place together. His name was not spoken in boardrooms. It was felt there. He did not attend galas. Events attended him. And in the underground world where alliances were written in silence and broken in blood, Zoran Vale had only one reputation that truly mattered. He never forgave. Not enemies. Not failures, not disappearances. His compound sat on the northern ridge of Varenk. Black stone, glass walls, surrounded by water on 2 sides as though the architecture itself was trying to keep the world out. Inside, everything moved with surgical precision. Staff who lasted knew one rule above all others: do not become interesting to him, because interest from Zoran Vile was not a gift. It was a gravitational pull. And everything pulled toward him eventually broke apart or became something else entirely. The city feared him. His allies respected him. His enemies, the ones still breathing, stayed far away. But 5 years ago, something happened inside those walls. Something quiet. Something that should never have meant anything to a man like him. A woman walked in, and then she vanished. And Zoran Vile, the man who never forgave, the man who never forgot, spent half a decade pretending he had. He hadn't. Her name was Saoirse Ndem. On the morning everything changed for the second time, she was doing what she always did before the twins woke up, standing at the kitchen window of her 2-room flat in the port town of Mereth, hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had gone cold, watching the fog sit on the water like it had nowhere better to be. She understood that fog. In the weeks after she fled Varenk, she had moved 3 times. A guest house outside the city, a rented room 2 provinces over, paying cash each time and leaving before anyone could remember her face. When the pregnancy made moving difficult, she found Mireth and decided to stay. Small enough to disappear in, far enough that no one with a reason to look would ever think to look here. That had been close to 4 years ago. It had held. Mireth was not beautiful. It smelled of salt and diesel and the particular kind of tired that settles into towns that used to matter. But it was hers, paid for with her own hands, her own hours, her own stubborn refusal to need anyone. A sound from the back room, small feet hitting the floor. Saoirse set down the cup. "Mama." Ren appeared in the doorway first, always first, dark-eyed and serious, carrying himself like someone she was trying hard not to think about. 4 years old and already watching the world like it owed him an honest answer. Behind him came Nia, his twin. Softer at the edges, quicker to laugh, but absorbing everything with those same quiet eyes. "You're up early." "Ren said there was a boat," Nia announced gravely. "There's always a boat. A big one." Saoirse almost smiled. Almost. The morning moved the way it always did, efficiently, without waste. She dressed them, fed them, braided Nia's hair with the kind of muscle memory that had replaced almost everything she once knew about herself. She used to know how to walk into a room and command it, how to laugh without calculating whether it was safe, what it felt like to be wanted by someone whose wanting didn't come with a cost she couldn't afford. Those things were gone. That was the rule. There were several rules. Don't use her real name outside the flat. Don't contact anyone from before. Don't let the children ask too many questions about their father. Not yet. Not until she had an answer that was both honest and survivable. And above all others, the rule she had built the last 4 years on top of like a foundation poured in the dark. Do not go back to Varenk. She dropped Ren and Nia at their nursery, a small place 3 streets over run by a woman named Data who asked no questions, and walked to the market where she sold preserved goods 3 mornings a week. Smoked fish, pickled vegetables, honey from 2 hives on the flat roof she tended with more hope than skill. It was not the life she had imagined, but it was a life nobody could take from her. At the stall, arranging jars, she felt it. That particular stillness that falls over a space when something has shifted and no one has said it yet. Her chin lifted. A black car, idling at the end of the market lane. She told herself it meant nothing. She had been telling herself that for 5 years. This time, she was wrong. The car didn't move. It sat at the end of the lane, engine idling, dark windows giving nothing back. No plates she could read at this distance. No one stepping out. Pure presence. The deliberate, unhurried kind that said whoever was inside had already decided how this would go. Saoirse kept her hands moving, arranged a jar, straightened a label, smiled at a woman who stopped to ask about the honey. Inside, every nerve she owned was screaming. She had constructed a life so quiet, so buried under ordinariness, that no one with a reason to look would ever think to look here. Mireth wasn't on any map that mattered. It was a town people left, not arrived at. That was precisely why she had chosen it. The car pulled away slowly. She exhaled. Too soon. As it disappeared around the corner, a man she didn't recognize stopped at her stall. Young, neat, the kind of neat that had nothing to do with personal taste and everything to do with instruction. He picked up a jar of pickled fennel, turned it over, set it back down. His eyes found hers. 1 second. Enough. Good product. She said nothing. He walked away. Her hands went motionless on the table because she knew, from a world she had once lived in, that the most dangerous moments never announced themselves. They didn't arrive with raised voices or visible weapons. They came exactly like this. Quiet. Polite. A jar turned over. A glance held 1 beat too long. Someone knew where she was. Not a possibility. A certainty. She could feel it the way you feel a change in weather before the clouds arrive. The only question, the one that turned her stomach to stone, was whether they had come alone, or whether they had simply come first. Across 3 countries and an ocean of silence he had maintained with great deliberate care, Zoran Vale stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his Varenk compound, watching the morning press itself flat against the water below. He had not slept. This was not unusual. Sleep required a willingness to stop thinking, and Zoran had not been willing for a long time. His mind was an instrument he kept running at all hours, because the moment he let it rest, other things moved into the quiet. Her name, for instance, Saoirse. He never said it aloud, but it was there every morning at the window. Something he kept stepping around, careful and deliberate, the way you navigate wreckage that still holds heat. His second Daker knocked once and entered. We found her. Zoran didn't turn, didn't move. Let the words settle into the room like sediment. Where? Not a question. Never a question with him. Questions implied doubt, and he had not permitted himself doubt since the night she walked out without a word, without a reason, without even the decency of an explanation he could be properly angry at. Mireth, Northern Port. 4 years, near enough. A silence that lasted exactly long enough to mean something. And Dacre paused. Rare for him. Which meant what came next required careful handling. There are children, sir. The window didn't shatter. The room didn't shake. Nothing moved at all. But something in Zoran Vale shifted, deep, tectonic, invisible to anyone watching. How many? 2. He said nothing else. His hand, flat against the glass, slowly closed into a fist. He had questions now. He had nothing but questions. She knew before she heard the knock. Not from any particular sound. From that animal awareness she had carried for years, the one that had kept her alive in a world most people never saw, which woke all at once the moment she stepped back into her flat and found the air inside sitting differently than she had left it. Someone had been here. Not ransacked. Nothing taken. Everything exactly where she had placed it, which was worse, because it meant whoever had come inside was not interested in what she owned. They were interested in what she knew, what she was hiding. 40 minutes before Dada brought the twins back. 40 minutes to decide. She was pulling a bag from the wardrobe when the knock came. 3 times, measured. The kind of knock that wasn't asking permission. She went motionless. Saoirse. One word. One voice. A voice she had heard in her sleep for half a decade. Sometimes as comfort. More often as a warning she couldn't outrun. And her entire body went to war with itself. Every survival instinct said, don't open that door. Something older and harder to dismantle said something else entirely. She opened the door. Zoran Vile stood in the hallway of her building like an event, like weather, like something the architecture had not been designed to contain. No jacket. His collar open by one button, the only concession to what must have been a long journey. His eyes found hers immediately and didn't move. He had always done that, fixed on her like she was the only still point in a room full of motion. She had spent years trying to forget what that felt like. She hadn't managed it. You should have gone further. Low. Controlled. Clearly. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. The one mercy the moment offered her. How long have you known? Long enough. That isn't an answer. No. Something shifted behind his eyes. It isn't. He moved inside without being invited. Of course he did. He had never needed an invitation to anything in his life. And stood in the middle of her small kitchen, taking in the mismatched chairs, the children's drawings pinned beside the window, the 2 small pairs of shoes lined up near the door with the neatness of a child who had been taught to do it every single evening. He stopped at the shoes. 2 pairs. Tiny. Side by side with the neatness of a child made to do it every single evening. Or 2 children, both made, the habit already set in them like something permanent. Saoirse's chest locked. He turned back slowly. Every thread of control was still perfectly assembled, but underneath it, she could see something fracturing in real time. She had once known his face better than her own. The knowledge hadn't gone anywhere. How old? Silence. Saoirse. Quieter. Which somehow made it worse. How old are they? Her chin came up. 4. The word dropped into the room like a stone into still water. He held her gaze long enough that she counted her own heartbeats without meaning to. Long enough to watch him assemble and reassemble whatever he needed before he could speak again. You were pregnant when you left. Yes. And you didn't. No. A silence so complete it had weight. Why? Not anger. Not yet. Something more dangerous. A man who had spent a long time building an explanation for an absence, watching all of it come apart in a flat that smelled of salt and diesel. She had rehearsed this moment hundreds of times. In the dark, after the twins slept, she had built and dismantled every version of what she would say when it finally came. None of them had felt like enough. "I saw you," she said, "with Veda." And just like that, the air in the room changed completely. That name, that single name, it landed on Zoran Vale like something he had not been braced for. For the first time since he'd walked through her door, he looked like a man who didn't know what came next. Veda. He hadn't heard that name spoken in this weight, this tone, since the night everything collapsed. And the fact that Saoirse was saying it now, standing in her small kitchen with her arms folded, years of survival etched into every line of her face, told him she had seen something. And she had built her entire life on top of what she believed it meant. He opened his mouth, closed it. So unlike him that Saoirse blinked, because in every version of Zoran Vile she had ever known, silence was strategy, not shock. This was shock. "What exactly?" he said, each word arriving on its own. "Did you see?" "Does it matter now?" "It matters entirely." She held his gaze the way people hold the gaze of something they have rehearsed being detached from. "I came to find you that night. The anniversary of your mother's passing. You said you needed space, that you'd be in the East Wing alone." Her voice stayed flat. The flatness of someone who had cried every version of this moment dry, long ago. "You weren't alone." Something moved through his expression, swift, dark. "Saoirse." She was wearing my earrings. A pause that was both small and enormous. "The ones you gave me." She had them on, and she was a breath, a rebuild. It doesn't matter what she was doing. What matters is what I understood. Silence. "And you understood wrong." Barely above nothing. A short laugh. Hollow. "That's what they all say." "I'm not all of them." "No." Her eyes met his directly for the first time since she opened the door. "You're worse, because I actually believed you." That landed exactly where she meant it to. He had no answer for it. Not yet. But the silence said more than any answer could have. Dora's knock came at 6:20, the twins back early because of rain, and Saoirse watched Zoran's entire bearing shift. Not dramatically, not visibly to anyone who didn't know him, but she knew the way his weight changed when something arrived that he hadn't planned for. He had not planned for this. Saoirse crossed the room and opened the door before Dora could knock again. Ren and Nia tumbled in from the rain, damp-haired and urgent with the news that a cat at the nursery had sat on Ren's bag. "Mama, it just sat on it." It was enormous. They stopped. The way children stop when they enter a room and understand, without being told, that the air holds a shape they don't recognize. Ren's gaze moved to Zoran. Zoran went motionless. The silence that opened between them was the loudest thing Saoirse had ever stood inside, because Ren had his father's eyes. Not similar. Not reminiscent. Exactly. The same quality of taking everything in and giving nothing back until he had decided what it meant. Something behind Zoran's expression broke quietly and completely. Saoirse moved. She placed herself between her children and the man in her kitchen. Not aggressive, not dramatic. A mother standing where a mother stands. "Who is he?" Nia asked, with the magnificent directness of a 4-year-old who hadn't yet learned that some questions are dangerous. Saoirse opened her mouth. Zoran answered first. "Someone who knew your mother. A long time ago." Completely steady, Saoirse didn't know whether to be grateful or terrified by that. "Are you staying for dinner?" Ren asked, watching him, unmoving. Zoran's eyes moved briefly to Saoirse, a question he kept silent. Every rational part of her composed the polite but final dismissal. This was her world. Her flat. her children, her rules. Instead, she heard herself say, "If you want." Dottie, pausing in the doorway, regarded them all with the quiet perception of a woman who had seen enough of life not to comment on it. She said goodnight. The door clicked shut, and like that, Zoran Vale was sitting at Saoirse and Dem's small kitchen table while she made dinner, and his children, who didn't know they were his, told him about the enormous cat with the gravity of people delivering news of great international consequence. He didn't look like a man who controlled 3 continents. He looked like a man who had sat down at a kitchen table with his children for the first time, without knowing they were his children, and been completely and quietly undone by it. But across the city, someone had made a call, and the call had been answered. She knew something was wrong before she opened her eyes. The flat was too quiet. Not the good quiet. The soft, earned silence after the twins were asleep and the day was done. The wrong quiet. The kind that meant something that should be making sound wasn't. Zoran had left after dinner. He had stood at the door a moment, his attention resting on the twins asleep on the small sofa, and said nothing. Too much was still broken between them for words. He nodded once and went. She had locked the door behind him, checked it twice. Now it was 2 a.m, and Saoirse was moving before her mind caught up with what her body already knew. She checked the twins first, both sleeping. Nia curled around her toy rabbit, Ren on his back, one arm thrown wide, claiming the space even unconscious. She exhaled. Then the kitchen window shifted. Not opened. Moved. The way a window moves when pressure is applied from outside. Testing. Measuring. Saoirse reached the kitchen doorway without a sound. A man was halfway through the frame, large, methodical, unhurried. The kind of person who did this professionally and expected no resistance from a woman alone in a port town flat. He had miscalculated badly. She had spent 2 years inside Zoran's world. Not decoratively. What happened in the next 40 seconds was fast and silent, and nothing like what the man had planned. He was on the kitchen floor before he finished registering that she had moved, her knee on his back, his arm at an angle that made further movement inadvisable. "Who sent you?" He said nothing, which was its own answer. The front door came open, not forced, opened, with a key that shouldn't have existed. And Dacre stepped in first, followed immediately by Zoran. He took in the scene without visible surprise. The man on the floor, Saoirse composed above him, hair still in its nighttime braid. Something moved across his face. Not surprise. Something quieter and more complicated than that. Dacre handled the intruder. Efficient. Professional. It was clearly not the first time. Zoran crossed the kitchen and stopped in front of her. "Are you hurt?" "No." The children? Asleep. Nothing reached them. A pause. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You handled that?" "Yes." "I didn't know you could. There are things about me you never knew." She rose to her full height. "Because you never asked." That cost him something. She could see it land. "From tonight. Quietly. Immovably. You're not staying here." She started to object. Someone sent him. Patient. Immovable. "And whoever sent him knows where your children sleep." The objection died. Because he was right. And she hated that he was right. And she hated more that the only person she currently trusted to protect her children was the one who had broken her so completely the last time she trusted him. But the twins were asleep in the next room. 1 week. He nodded once. Neither of them acknowledged that 1 week was nowhere near enough for any of it. The compound was exactly as she remembered it. That was the worst part. She had rebuilt herself in direct opposition to everything this place represented. The cold stone, the controlled silence, the staff who moved as though the air itself might punish a wrong step. And yet walking back through those gates with Ren asleep against her shoulder and Nia holding her hand, something deep inside her recognized it, like a language she had tried to forget and hadn't quite managed. She was given rooms in the East Wing, far from his. She noticed. She told herself she was grateful. The next morning, a woman was sitting in the hallway outside her door, composed, expensive. The kind of stillness that was not peace but performance, assembled, not arrived at. Her name was Isolde Farr, Zoran's legal counsel, his longest professional alliance, and the woman, Saoirse had felt this 5 years ago, and felt it confirmed the moment their eyes met, who had wanted Zoran for herself for considerably longer than any working relationship explained. "He's asked me to brief you," Isolde said. No greeting. "On the parameters of your stay." Parameters. "You're a guest here, not a resident, not—" A pause, precise and deliberate. "Anything else?" Saoirse regarded her without hurry. "I'm aware of what I am." "Are you?" Isolde tilted her head slightly. "The children are becoming attached to routines here. That kind of attachment complicates departures. We won't be here long enough for that to matter." A smile arrived on Isolde's face, the kind that had already won the argument in its own head. "I've arranged a more suitable location for you both. Quieter, more appropriate for your situation. I'll have the details sent to your room." She left before Saoirse could respond. Saoirse stood in that corridor and understood two things simultaneously. Isolde Farr was maneuvering to push her out before she could settle, and Zoran had absolutely no idea. That made her more dangerous than any open enemy. Open enemies declared themselves. This one smiled while she worked and called it administration. She found him before he found her. Deliberate. She had learned, in the years before Mareth, that waiting hands the other person the advantage. So she went to his study, the room at the end of the north corridor where he had always gone when he needed to think, knocked once and walked in. He was at his desk, jacket off, something in front of him that he closed when she entered, not quickly enough for her to miss that it was a photograph. She didn't ask. "Isolde Farr came to see me this morning." He leaned back, said nothing, which meant he was listening fully. "She's arranged alternative accommodation for me and the children. Level, controlled. I'd like to know if that was your instruction or hers." "Mine would have gone through Dacre." "So hers then." He said nothing. Confirmation enough. She moved to the chair across from his desk and sat, because sitting said she was not leaving until this was finished. "I didn't come back here to be managed. I came because someone broke into the flat where my children were sleeping. That is the only reason I am in this building. I know. I don't need—" "I know, Saoirse." The way he said her name. She had told herself she'd forgotten. That particular weight, like a word only he pronounced correctly. Her gaze moved away. "The photograph," she said. "On your desk." He didn't answer immediately. It was us. Not a question. She had recognized the frame. She had bought him that frame. Before everything. Silence. "You kept it?" "Yes." One word from somewhere so unguarded it altered the temperature of the entire room. She had come here to establish a boundary, to lay down the terms of a temporary arrangement with clean edges and no room for interpretation. She had not come to feel the ground shift beneath half a decade of certainty that she had built, carefully and at great cost, into something she could stand on. Don't. Don't what? Don't make this into something it can't be. "I haven't said a word." "No." She rose. "But you kept the photograph." She left before either of them said anything they weren't ready for. The fragile, necessary damage was done. She could feel it as she walked away. Something quietly reopened that she had convinced herself was sealed permanently. His name was Creed Malone. The moment Dacre placed the file on Zoran's desk and Zoran opened it, the room dropped several degrees without anyone touching a window. Milan had been a structural problem for 7 years. Not the loud kind, but the kind that embeds quietly and waits. He controlled the southern trade corridors that Zoran's operation had been patiently, carefully absorbing. The process required precision and, above all, no disruptions. The man in Sers's kitchen window in Mireth had been Milan's. That told Zoran two things immediately. First, Milan knew about Sersa, which meant someone inside Zoran's circle had spoken. A breach existed somewhere it was never supposed to exist. Second, Milan had moved on her specifically, not on Zoran's operation directly, on her. Because Milan understood something Zoran had not fully acknowledged even to himself, until he sat at a kitchen table in Mireth and watched his son regard him with those dark, unreadable, achingly familiar eyes. She was leverage, the kind that needs no spoken threat to function, the kind that only has to exist, visible, present, known about, for the power it holds to become devastatingly real. Milan didn't need to move against Zoran directly. He only needed Zoran to know he could. The gate alarm triggered at noon. Dacre appeared in the doorway before the echo finished. Vehicle, Milan's plates. He's at the front. Zoran closed the file, straightened his jacket. The shift from the man who kept a photograph in his desk drawer to the man who ran 3 continents of shadow took 4 seconds and was complete. He found Sersa in the east corridor, moving toward the noise because of course she was. She had never moved away from things that frightened her, not once in all the time he had known her. It was one of the qualities about her that had undone him the first time he encountered it. Apparently, time had not changed that. Apparently, nothing had. Go back to the children. Even. Quiet. What's happening? Nothing that... Zoran. Direct. Unafraid. What is happening? He held her gaze for 1 second. A man who used the break-in at your flat to send me a message, he said. He's here to deliver the rest in person. Her jaw tightened. What message? That he knows what you are to me. A pause he hadn't planned. What the children are. She went absolutely motionless. He's going to use us. Not a question. He's going to try. Her chin lifted. In her expression, not fear. Something older. Something considerably harder. Then we need a plan. Together? He hadn't expected that word. Together. For the first time in half a decade, he found he couldn't look away from it. The meeting with Creed Milan lasted 11 minutes. Sersa stood in the surveillance room with Dacre and watched it on the monitor. Zoran at the far end of the long table, Milan across from him. 2 men who had built their respective empires on the same principle. Show nothing. Take everything. She couldn't hear the words, but she had spent enough time in rooms like that to read the shape of a conversation. This was not a negotiation. This was a declaration. Milan left the same way he arrived, unhurried, composed, nothing out of place. At the door he paused, turned, and directed his gaze at the surveillance camera with absolute precision. At her. He smiled. Then he was gone. Dacre said nothing, but his hand moved instinctively to the side of his jacket. He knew I was watching. Yes. He wanted me to know. Yes. She turned from the monitor. Her mind was already moving, not in panic, in pattern. The same part of her that had handled the intruder in Mireth without fracturing. The same part that had built an entire life from almost nothing in a town nobody cared about. The same part she had spent years suppressing because it reminded her too sharply of who she had been before she decided being invisible was safer. She had been wrong about that. Tell me about him, she said. Dacre's expression shifted slightly. I'm not asking for classified files. I'm asking what kind of man he is. She held his gaze. Because I grew up watching my father read people the way other men read contracts. And I need to know if what I saw in that smile is what I think it is. Dacre went motionless. Your father. His name. She hadn't said it in years. She had kept it in a locked room inside herself alongside everything else that was true, but not yet safe. The name, the memory, and the shape of a man's face she hadn't seen since she was 17 years old. Osura Ndem, she said. He ran the Western humanitarian corridors for 11 years before he disappeared. I was 17. The silence that followed was specific. The kind that forms when information rearranges itself around a significant new piece. Dacre. Sharp. You recognize that name? Something new entered his expression, something that resembled genuine discomfort. Zoran needs to hear this from you directly. Tonight. She held his gaze. Tell me why first. A hesitation long enough to drop her stomach. Because Osura Ndem didn't disappear, Dacre said carefully. He was moved, hidden, protected by someone who understood exactly what he had uncovered about Milan's operation, what the evidence meant, what it would expose, and what Milan would do to silence him permanently if he remained where people could find him. The room tilted. Protected by whom? Dacre held her gaze. By Zoran, he said. 3 months before you ever walked into this compound. Everything she thought she knew rearranged itself in a single breath. She found Zoran in the courtyard, outside, in the cold evening air, which meant he already knew what Dacre had told her, which meant this conversation had been building since before she arrived, perhaps since before she left. My father, she said. No preamble, no careful approach. He turned from the railing slowly. He's alive. A long breath. Yes. That word landed on her like the first solid thing she had encountered in 5 years. Yes. Simple. Devastating. Her father grieved alone in the dark of her Meerith flat, with no one to hold while she did it. Alive. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her sides. Where? Safe. A property outside Varenk. I've had people with him the entire time. He moved closer. When I found out what Milan's organization had done to suppress your father's work, what they were willing to do to silence him permanently, moving him was the only option. There was no time to tell me. Her voice cracked on it. There was no time to tell me. You had disappeared. Something raw entered his voice. Unpolished. Unguarded. Not the Zoran who walked into rooms and made them recalibrate. The other one. You were gone. Reaching you would have exposed where you were to people actively searching for leverage against me. She turned away, looked at the dark garden, breathed. And, Veda. She turned back. That night. Explain it. Not to make me feel better, she added before he could speak. Because I need to know if I destroyed everything, if I took my children and ran and rebuilt my entire life over something that wasn't what I believed it was. He was quiet long enough that her chest closed around the waiting. Veda came to me that night, he said. The earrings. I didn't give them to her. I found out afterward that she had taken them from your room. A careful pause. She had been positioning herself for a long time. I handled it privately. I didn't want to force you to choose between her and me. That was not your decision to make. It was mine. She is my sister. Not yours to manage. No. Simply. Directly. It wasn't. And I have known that for a long time. She's my sister. I know. She let me run. The voice broke fully this time. She let it. Half a decade was long enough to hold something together before it needed to come apart. She knew what I believed. She knew I was pregnant. She knew I was running, and she never once picked up a phone. Never once sent a word. 5 years, and nothing. That is not a mistake. That is a choice. I know. Does she know where I've been? His jaw tightened. No. I made certain of that. Silence settled between them. Not empty, but full of everything that had been true all along without either of them knowing the whole of it. "Our children deserve a world not built on this much damage," she said. "Yes." 2 steps closer. "So do you." She looked at him, at the face she had tried for half a decade to stop dreaming about. "Milan knows about them. Yes. They're not safe until he's handled." "No, nor is your father." She assembled herself the way she always did when she felt most broken. Quietly, from the inside out, without asking for help. Then Dacre appeared at the courtyard door, breathing fast, which meant something had already begun. "They've taken the children," he said. The world stopped. The room moved. Not physically. Everything was exactly still. But the world rearranged itself around those 4 words. "They've taken the children." And nothing after them would ever sit in the same place again. Sersa was moving before Dacre finished speaking. Zoran caught her arm, not to stop her running into the dark without a direction. "Listen to me." Low, clear. "They want an exchange." She stared at him. "Milan wants the information your father compiled, the full record of everything the southern corridors have done over the last decade. Evidence, testimony, all of it." His grip on her arm was steady, anchoring. "Hand it over and Milan walks away. His operation survives. He returns the children." She breathed with great care. "And if we don't?" He said nothing. "Zoran, if we don't?" "Milan escalates." She pulled free, turned away, turned back. What she was feeling was beyond anger, beyond fear. Something primal and structural. The sensation of a mother whose children have been lifted out of the world she built specifically to hold them. "My father spent 11 years on that record," she said. "People died for it. He nearly died for it. Hand it over and all of that counts for nothing." "I know. But the children?" "I know." Quietly, completely. She looked at him, and for the first time since she had walked back into his world, the distance between what had broken them and what still existed between them, that carefully maintained, necessary space she had used to breathe, collapsed entirely. "What do you want to do?" he asked. Genuinely. No strategy underneath it. No answer already decided and waiting to be agreed with. He was asking her. Actually, asking. As though her answer was the one that mattered most. She hadn't expected that. Not from him. Not yet. "I want both," she said. "The children back." And Milan finished. "Then that's what we do." "You don't even know if it's possible." "No." Something entered his face, the quality she had recognized years ago. The thing that made him dangerous, the thing that had also, once, made her feel safer than anywhere else on earth. "But neither does he, and he doesn't know you." The plan began taking shape between them, built in low voices, in stolen minutes, in the space between 2 people who had once known how to do everything together. But plans in Milan's world had a way of arriving 1 step too late. The exchange point was a warehouse at the edge of the port district. Milan's choice. His ground. His terms. Every single disadvantage, and Zoran accepted them all without argument. Because Milan needed to believe the outcome was decided. Men certain of victory stop looking for what they've missed. Sayersha sat in the car outside with Dacre while Zoran went in first. This was the plan. This was what she had agreed to. She lasted 4 minutes. "I'm going in." "That is specifically what—" "Dacre." Her voice was steady, final. "Those are my children." He held her gaze for 3 full seconds. Then he handed her the secondary radio piece. Some arguments, his expression said plainly, were not worth the breath. She moved through the side entrance he had identified from building plans, low, quiet, disciplined, with a muscle memory she hadn't accessed in years that returned now with a completeness that unnerved her. Not because it felt foreign, because it felt natural, because the body remembers what the mind decides to forget. It keeps the knowledge clean, filed away, untouched. And hers had been waiting, patient and intact and undiminished, for a reason to come back online. Tonight was that reason. The dark, the angles, the way sound moved differently in empty industrial space. She knew this. She had grown up around people who operated in darkness, and she had always paid close attention, even when everyone assumed she wasn't. Her father had called it her gift, watching without being watched. She found the twins before she found Malone, Ren and Nia, in a side room off the main floor. A guard nearby, not unkind, which was somehow more unsettling than cruelty would have been. Ren sat upright, arms folded, watching the door. Waiting for her. She nearly made a sound, she didn't. She signaled on the radio, Dacre's people moved. And 30 seconds later she had her children pressed against her in the dark, and Ren's voice was at her ear. Small, completely steady. I knew you'd come. Always, she breathed. Always. Are you hurt? No. Nia? I want to go home, Nia said. Small and fierce and fighting the urge to cry. I know. Soon. She kissed both their heads, then met Ren's eyes. Stay here with Dacre's man when he comes. Do not move until I say. Ren regarded her with those calm, familiar eyes. What are you going to do? She had asked herself the same question half a decade ago in a Varenk hallway, when she thought she had lost everything worth keeping. She had run then. That was over. What I should have done long ago, she said quietly. Back toward the main floor she went. Malone never saw her coming. Neither did Zoran. But both were about to find out exactly who Sersan Dem was when she stopped making herself smaller than she was. Malone was mid-sentence when she walked into the light. He stopped. Zoran's attention found her immediately, that precise, constant awareness of exactly where she was in any room. And something crossed his face. Not alarm. Recognition. Like a man who had been waiting for something and had finally stopped pretending he hadn't. I thought, Malone said, recovering smoothly. We agreed on terms. You agreed on terms. She walked to the center of the space and stopped. Deliberate, unhurried. I didn't agree to anything. Malone assessed her with the cool evaluation reserved for things whose value is being decided. Braver than I expected. You expected wrong. She held his gaze without effort. The children are out. They're safe. Your leverage is gone. What you have left is a conversation with two people who have distinct and serious reasons to ensure you don't leave this building the way you entered it. A silence that could have gone several ways. Then Dacre's voice through the radio. Malone's perimeter was handled. His exit was sealed. Malone looked between them. Something recalculated. And then, deliberately, he sat down. Because men like Malone, when genuinely cornered, have enough intelligence to know it. The rest was handled with efficiency and finality. Nothing left open. Outside afterward, cold air, water nearby, Dacre a discreet distance away, and the twins warm and safe in the car. Zoran stood beside her, and neither of them spoke for a long time. You walked in. The plan had gaps. A pause. What you did in there, I didn't expect it. There is a great deal about me you didn't expect, because you never asked, and I never told you. I'm not saying that to punish you, she said. I'm saying it because if there's any after, it has to be built differently. You ask. I tell. Yes. Without hesitation. She breathed in the cold air. I have been looking for you. The quiet that meant something true was arriving at cost. Not to retrieve something I lost. Not for the children. For you. Something in her chest moved. I was wrong. Waited. Unfamiliar on his tongue. About Veda. About your father. About not standing beside you when I should have. I should have. All of it. That word. Wrong. From him. She had never once heard it. Then what are you asking? She said. No strategy, no calculation. A man in the cold beside the only person who had ever made him feel like a question worth answering. Come home. His voice dropped to something she hadn't heard in years. Not the compound, not any of this. Home. With me. The silence that followed had its own heartbeat. She didn't answer him that night. Not because she didn't know what she felt. Feeling had never been the problem. The problem was what feeling cost and who paid when it broke. A price she was still counting in small shoes by a door and cold tea on a foggy morning. Before anything else, she asked to see her father. Zoran drove her himself. No Dacre, no security detail. A road outside Varenk in the dark, and then a house. Small, warm, lit from inside. And a man who opened the door before they reached it. Her father. Older, thinner, but present and real. And Sayersa walked into his arms and let half a decade of being strong enough on her own become something she could finally set down. She let herself cry, properly, without managing it. Zoran moved away without being asked, gave her the space. Another thing she hadn't expected from him. They sat at the kitchen table for 2 hours. She told him about Mireth, the market stall, the twins, the fog in the mornings. He told her what he had uncovered, what Milan had done, what Zoran had risked quietly to keep him alive while the evidence was completed. He never told me, she said. Her father regarded her with the gentle precision of a man who had observed people from close range long enough to understand them. He wouldn't. That's not how he's built. He protects things quietly, including you, even when you were gone. Veda, she said after a long silence. I know. Careful, sad, unsurprised. She called me last month. She knows what she did. She's not asking for forgiveness. She said that herself. She only wanted me to know she was sorry. He met Saoirse's eyes. What you do with that is yours to decide. I won't tell you how. Saoirse looked at her hands on the worn kitchen table. Not yet, she said. Maybe not for a long time. That's fair. And nothing more needed to be said. She drove back to the compound in the early hours. Zoran was in the courtyard, no jacket, an untouched glass beside him, and he looked up when she appeared and waited. One thing remained before morning. She found Isolde Farr in the east corridor, still working, because a woman like that never stopped. The alternative accommodation you arranged, Saoirse said. Isolde looked up, composed. Yes. Cancel it. A pause. Isolde set her pen down slowly. That decision isn't... I've spoken to Zoran. Saoirse held her gaze. No heat, no aggression, only the quiet certainty of a woman who had survived long enough on her own to have nothing left to be intimidated by. It is. Isolde held that gaze for a measured moment. Then she picked up her pen. As you say. Not a concession. A recognition. That was enough. Saoirse returned to the courtyard and sat across from Zoran. Try it differently this time, she said. Tell me things. Ask me things. Let me stand beside you. Something in his face opened. Slowly, like a room long shut with the window finally cracked. I can do that. Good. She rose. The children wake up early. I know. A pause. I'd like to be there. She considered him for a moment. Then, be there. And walked inside. 3 months later, Wren asked the question she had been waiting for. They were at the kitchen table, their kitchen now, the one she had gradually, stubbornly, without making a declaration of it, turned into something that smelled like food and felt like morning. Zoran was reading, Naya was drawing, and Wren, who had his father's stillness and her own habit of waiting for exactly the right moment to say the true thing, looked up from his bowl and said, "Is he our father?" Nobody moved. Saoirse set down her cup. She looked at Zoran. She looked at her son. Yes. Simply. The way she had learned to say true things after years of building her life around careful omissions. Ren considered this with the gravity he brought to everything. Then his gaze moved to Zoran. "Why didn't you know about us?" Zoran set down what he was reading and met the boy's eyes with complete seriousness. Because he had learned, in 3 months of early mornings and bedtime stories told badly at first and then better, that this child did not accept incomplete answers. Because I made mistakes. And your mother made the best decision she could with what she knew. And then I found you. A pause. And I'm not leaving. Ren held his gaze for a long moment, then went back to his bowl. Nia, who had been listening with focused attention, looked at Saoirse. Does that mean he lives here now? It means we're figuring it out. Nia found this satisfactory and returned to her drawing. Zoran met Saoirse's eyes across the table. Something passed between them. Quiet and full and neither easy nor simple but real. The realest thing. The one neither of them had been willing to name until now. Later, she found a note on the kitchen counter. 4 words in his handwriting. The same handwriting she had once read love letters in a life that had felt so far away it might have belonged to someone else entirely. I'm not leaving. Ever. She folded it once, put it in her pocket, kept it there. Some stories begin with falling. Some begin with running. This one began with a woman who ran so hard and so far that she built an entire world in the space between herself and the truth. And a man who finally understood that love is not possession, not protection, not strategy. It is this, showing up, every morning, especially the hard ones. If this story moved you, if you felt it somewhere real, subscribe now. Because the next one is already waiting, and it might undo you more beautifully.